Hello, everyone, and welcome to Co-Creation Co-Creation Station. I never realized that's a little hard to say, actually. I don't know why my voice went up 7 octaves there, but welcome to Co-Creation Station, the podcast where we talk about spiritual magic, the law of attraction, the mind-body-spirit connection, and how to best enjoy this mystical, miraculous, mysterious, crazy, sometimes confounding, but always incredible journey we call life. My name is Collin. I'm coming to you from beautiful North Hollywood, California, and I am a musician, teacher, and tarot oracle card reader.
My name is Stephanie, and I'm a transformational life coach here in San Diego, and I help people shift away from negative thinking, and it has a huge impact on their lives.
Yes, it does. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. If you're listening to the audio version on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts, and if you're watching us on the Co-Creation Station YouTube channel, thank you so much for watching us. If you feel compelled to, if it feels like the right thing to do and you would like to follow us, give us a review, like us, subscribe to us, whatever the platform you're on allows you to do for us, it would be very helpful for us and we'd be super grateful to you. Each week here on Co-Creation Station, we start our conversation about the art of allowing and the law of attraction from a different standpoint. And this week, Stephanie, we are starting from where?
Going with the flow, being present, letting go of control.
Oh, I was wondering what piece of the conversation we were having in our friend time before this, you were like, that's it, let's do that. Yeah, flow and letting go of control. I love that. All right. So yeah. Do you want to start us off or?
Being present. Yeah, we were talking in our friend time about, you were sharing this experience you had while being at work, traveling, and just how you were, it was almost like a picture show where you were observing what was going on in the room, and there was all these different people, conflicting sides, and you were just kind of like, wait, and then you were just being present in the moment. And then also, with work, just comparing like how you were this past week versus in the past few years, what it was like, and this noticing like your growth and how you responded very differently in a more, loving way to yourself. And I was just like, kind of reminded me of, some things that happened this week. And I was just noticing, like observing, and how, I'm really attached. I'm very aware of my emotions and how I feel, how something feels. And then just being in a situation where I think it's going to go a certain way, or I want it to go a certain way, and yet it's playing out in a very different way. And then just like trusting that it's okay. Mm-hmm. And then also having enough self-awareness and practicing self-care that I can be in the moment of like, have my feelings. It's okay. We talked about this in the last episode about my feelings and emotions are valid, feeling them, whether they feel good or they don't feel good, and then letting them through, and then being like, okay, like I ask myself, oh, what do I need? What do I want? And then being able to state it in a way that I feel that it's presented, it's more presentable than if I go at it thinking I'm not going to get it, and I come at it with this, vengeance, like that's not going to be received very well, and I'm most likely not going to have the outcome I want. And I can't control that, but I can definitely present it in a way that it's received more effectively than not. And then it's very possible I have a more positive outcome, that I'm more likely to get what I want. So kind of that, we can't be in control, but yet we can definitely have a hand of how life can be better for us. Relationships can be improved. Our experiences can benefit. We can get more of what we want. What is that saying? No, I'm not even gonna say it, because last time I said it, you were like, yeah, I don't believe that one. So we won't go there. But yeah, so there.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Now I'm curious, like, what do I have a block there? Am I like holding on to something I should be able to? Yeah, one thing so I flew from the Los Angeles area to San Francisco this week for a sort of a teaching conference kind of thing, where I was amongst a bunch of other teachers. and there were various things we had to do, but part of it was we were there to learn something that we're going to teach to others in the near future. And so I told you parts of that story. One part I didn't tell you was that I told you on Wednesday, which was the middle day of the trip, we were going to do teach backs. So that all the teachers that were attending, there's about 20 of us, were going to kind of required to teach part of what we had learned on Monday and Tuesday to the rest of the class, which was all teachers. And we would have 30 minutes to teach our section. And the section I signed up for was pretty late in the day. We started at 8 a.m. and my slot was like 3 to 3:30 p.m. And we had been given our assignments at the end of the day before. So you had whatever time at your hotel that night you wanted to spend. They gave us an hour, I think, from 8 to 9. That morning, if you wanted to use that, and then you would be watching other people's teach back, so you wouldn't really have time to prepare. And they told me at 10 a.m., I want to say 10, 11 a.m., somewhere in there, they told me that they had changed almost all of the section that I was going to teach back to the class. Like they had actually changed the book, the manual that we were teaching out of. And I was like, oh, that's okay. Just send it to me. And they're like, well, it's not done yet. And, but we'll get it to you as soon as we can, and I was thinking, again, I don't remember if it was like 10 or 11 a.m., but I was thinking, okay, so I should get this in like half an hour. I get it at like 2. And at 2 o'clock, like somebody else is teaching back. So like, I'm trying not to be rude and I'm trying to pay attention because we're supposed to give 2 or 3 minutes of feedback to the teacher that just finished, so I want to participate. So but I'm like, they gave me this thing and I'm like, this is almost all of what I was going to teach. And I prepared something else. And I just, I know that years ago, before I worked with you, before I did a lot of the learning about, flow and law of attraction, that I would have created I would have had negative beliefs that would have reacted to that situation, created new negative thoughts about it, created anger, powerlessness, not good feelings, and quite probably would have created, like when it got to my time, either I would have had a conflict, like I would have argued with the organizers or something, or I would have tried to do it, but kind of come into it with this, like, well, how can they, because no one else in the class had to do this. It's so funny. It's like the universe, it was not like the universe was teaching me something. And so, I got to my teach back, my presentation at 3 o'clock, and I started, and pretty soon I hit the new material because it was almost the whole thing. And I did okay. And then I hit a point where I was sort of reading quickly, like what had been changed. And I didn't fully understand a section. I thought I had when I skimmed it. And when I got to it, I was like, oh, I actually don't know what they're talking about there. And so I definitely had a moment in my mind where some old beliefs were creating negative thoughts, like, well, they shouldn't have done this to me. But like, I just sort of, I think part of it too is I've had practice with this sort of thing. Being a musician, quite often when I'm performing, something about the sound guy hits the wrong button by a total accident, or I used to be in a band with a drummer who would break something on his drum kit at some point in every show, and it would I'd be standing in front of the drums playing guitar and singing, and I just hear this some big boom, and then the drumming is suddenly different than I've never heard that it played that way. So, I have a lot of experience, okay, just go with it. You're in front of everybody.
Go with the flow. Huh?
Yeah. So I just did that. It was kind of a train wreck. I had pauses and discomfort and not knowing that no one else had in the class. And when I got done, I remember thinking, I remember noticing that my self-talk had really changed from years ago, because what I was telling myself was, ooh, that was definitely not perfect. However, the whole purpose of this was for us to learn how to teach it. We're not supposed to be finished learning how to teach it yet. We're supposed to be learning how to teach it. And what I know now is like when we're learning things, we automatically do things which our society calls mistakes, which I just now call learning. It's like, because when you don't know how to do something, you don't do it correctly. Like the process of learning how to do it correctly is usually doing it incorrectly in a bunch of different ways, a bunch of different times. And then you're like, oh, I figure out, it's just this sort of process. So I was telling myself like, oh, then I was a success because I made a mistake, which helped me learn what I'm supposed to learn. And I'm going to feel pretty good about it. But I was kind of like bracing myself a little bit because we got the 2 or 3 minutes of feedback. And I feel like, well, I know what I might have said a couple of years ago. If I had watched that, it'd be like, yeah, you really need to be more confident in your material. So I was kind of bracing myself for that. I was like, okay, if the rest of the class like kind of comes down on me for that, I'm going to listen, but I'm not going to take it personally. I'm not going to let it affect me because I know I was in my brain when it happened and I know that I did my best and all that kind of stuff. And what surprised me was that it was a really positive group of people. Like I feel very blessed. It was a group of people who were very oriented towards looking for the good, Nice. But we were encouraged to, point out anything that, was a negative as well.
Yeah.
But it really struck me because multiple people said that the moment where I had the train wreck was like my best moment because they said like, you just stayed calm. You didn't act like you were the arrogant leader of the teaching session. You acted like a human being who was in charge, but was a human in the moment and didn't know exactly what the next thing was. And you had the humility and vulnerability to acknowledge to the group that you didn't know everything perfectly. And you asked the group for help. And that gave us all permission to be human with you. Because as students, we don't know what you're trying to teach us either, So the fact that you hit a point where you didn't understand something gave us permission to be in the learning process, that beginner mind, and not feel this pressure that we feel so often in our society that even though we just learned this, you should now be able to know it perfectly, And so it was a really good lesson for me, just sort of hearing the feedback of like, oh yeah, man, when I relax and go with the flow and don't make a mountain out of a molehill, because, you and I have talked about this before, my brain, by going into those old beliefs and the old beliefs generating the negative thoughts and negative thoughts generating, not feeling good feelings, my brain was doing that thing, the lizard brain that we talk about, from ancient humankind of like, my brain's like, oh my God, our village is getting attacked by a saber-toothed tiger. It's time to fight, or run or freeze or fawn or whatever. And it was really cool that, at least in that instance, I'm not saying I do this perfectly all the time, but, I was able to breathe, keep breathing and just be like, okay, this is not ideal. This isn't the perfect way to do this, but I'm not going to panic. I'm not going to like start freaking out or yell at people or whatever. And so many people actually came up to me afterwards too, because everybody knew that the material had been changed. Like the organizers did tell everybody that. So it wasn't like, I was being compared unfavorably to other people. But I had a couple people tell me like, I would have told the organizers I'm not doing it. Like if I had prepared a whole thing to teach and then they changed it at the last minute, I would have asked for like another day to prepare, or like, can I do it later, in the afternoon or whatever. And they said, I'm really impressed that you just like rolled with that. Like that they told you in the morning it was going to be different and they handed it to you an hour before you started and you just rolled with it. Like you didn't complain, you didn't get upset, you didn't get frustrated. And that was
really run and hide, right?
Or run, or try to cover it, somehow. Like I used to do this and I see it, in people presenting or performing, or they make a mistake or have a train wreck and then they like start spewing this like defense like they've committed a crime, like, oh, I'm so sorry, everybody, I blah, 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 blah. And it's like so unnecessary. It's like, this is just life, and nobody's life is threatened right now. Like, we're not in any actual physical danger. Like, this is just work. You know, we want to do well, we want to do a quality job, but it's like, you know, we're not sending somebody to the moon, we're not we're not curing cancer. It's like,
or brain
work,
surgery.
you know?
Yeah.
Work. We can keep it in perspective, you know. So but I think I don't mean to, I feel like I've just been bragging about my personal progress, and that wasn't the intent of that, but I just think it's like,
and you're not bragging, and even if you were, it's okay. Like I it's okay to brag. Thank you for sharing all of that. And what keeps coming to mind towards the end of your story is how important doing that inner work is, because it's all the work that you've done that helped you have that experience in a very different way than in the past, and how we're constantly evolving. And you know, I think of that for myself a lot of times, the way I show up today versus you know, 5 years ago or 10 years ago, or you know, even when I was in my 20s, however, whatever it may be, that all the work, all the personal inner work that I've done has helped me become the woman that I am today. And I bless that and honor it, because I like how I show up today. I really love who I am and how I am. And that just didn't happen like that. It took a lot of, you know, I have a ton of support in my life, and I've done a lot of things over the years, and I see the value in it. And it was worth every bit of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's things that, you know, when I'm able to go with the flow like that, when I'm able to roll with the punches, as the saying goes, like, there's just possibilities. There's just all these positive possibilities and opportunities that come from that if I freak out and I get angry and I get resistant and I get defensive, it's almost like I'm slamming doors on the universe. Like, oh, that really cool thing. Yeah, slam that door. You know, like, this great thing that could happen, slam that door. I'm going hard in the negative. Like, don't bring me anything positive. I mean, years ago, I was in a band called Victor Bravo in New York City. You know, we went through various lineup changes, but in the end, the lineup we settled on was similar to my current band, where we had just me playing guitar and singing, and our drummer Dan. And it's a lot to explain, but basically there was a period where we became friends with a lot of similar bands in New York, and we weren't ready to actually do a show yet. So we were going to other people's shows to sort of learn the venues and meet people and like sort of get the vibe and all that. And one thing we noticed really early on, and we talked about it, and we made a very strong decision, which served us so well for the entire 6-year history of that band, was that we would go to a show and we'd see this band that either we were friends with or we would become friends with them after that show, and they would be amazing. Like, they would be so original, and you know, what they were doing was so cool and just, I don't know, just exciting artistically. And Dan and I would be so jazzed by the end of their 30 to 40 minute set. And we would go up to them afterwards and we would say, that show was amazing. You guys are incredible. And almost every time, I'm not exaggerating, the musician in that band would just spew this monologue at us about, oh, this show was terrible. I'm so sorry you guys came to this show. Like, we messed up the second song. The fourth song was a total train wreck. We couldn't hear ourselves. The sound in here was all messed up. We don't know what was going on. Like, so-and-so's bass guitar wasn't working for the last 2 songs, you know, like, please come back. Like, we're going to rehearse. We're going to get this more together. Please come back. And this would happen repeatedly to us. Like, we would just be blown away. Like, we'd just seen the Rolling Stones, and before the Rolling Stones were the Rolling Stones, you know, and it's like, oh my God. And we go up with that kind of enthusiasm. And because we're in these small clubs and the bands are all relatively unknown, we get to like talk to Mick Jagger and Keith Richards and, you know, all that. And like, we had all this energy and excitement and happiness and joy and like, yeah, you just did your thing. Like, keep doing this. And the musician in the band would literally like grab that energy and like ratchet it down. And after somebody says something like that, it's like they've slammed the door on you. Like, you can't keep talking about how great it was, because they've defined the show for you. Like, no, this was a bad show. You should have had a bad experience. And what we noticed as this would happen with other people, because other people would come up to them and go, you guys were great. And they do the same thing. Oh no, this was terrible. What we would observe physically was somebody, a potential fan in the audience, would go from like, this band is amazing, and the musician would convince them that it wasn't a good show. And they would literally go home. Like, Dan and I were schooled enough in music where we were like, I don't care what they said. That was an amazing show. They're an amazing band. Talking about.
Right.
But other people would go from super happy to like, oh, sorry. Oh, that sounds terrible. I'm sorry you guys had to go through that. Yeah, all right. And they would leave feeling like, oh, that was a terrible show. But it was the musician that had convinced them it was a terrible show. Like, literally, they were ready to like, and so Dan and I made this agreement, like, before we even started doing shows, we're like, we will never do that. As long as we're in the venue after the show, all we will do is either say positive things about the show, or we will just listen and thank people. We kept that for 6 years. And after every show we ever did, there was nothing but positive energy. But it was
despite maybe you having like an inner critic and going, oh, I messed up right there.
Well, this is what we learned when we started doing shows, was that, and I think a lot of musicians are like this, is music is a very kind of mathematical, I don't know what the right word to say is, like a logically ordered thing, right? Like, you have a introduction, and then you have the first verse, and then you have the first chorus, and then you have the bridge, and then the end. And it's all, there is kind of a mental track laid out in your mind of like, okay, this part is this part is this. And what I realized when I started performing was like, there was a part of my brain I didn't even know existed that was like keeping like a transcript of every single mistake I had made. Like, if I played the wrong chord at the wrong time, my finger was on the wrong string, I missed a line of the, I confused a line of the verse with a line from the chorus or something. It literally was like I had to, like in olden days, talk like a ticker tape of like, somebody presented a report to me at the end, and like, this is every single mistake you made the entire 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And there was this compulsion to talk about it because you've been through this experience.
Yeah.
But Dan and I would say, like, as hard as it is, we were in New York, it was like, we wait till you and me get in the cab and there's no one around. Then we just like, oh, I can't believe it. And we would do that. We would do that. But the other thing about that was so exciting to discover was that if you do what the other musicians were doing and you're convincing everybody they should have had a bad time, then you talk to the other musicians in your band and you're all commiserating and you're making yourself feel worse. Like you're reliving what you perceived as a failure. What we realized is we get off stage, we want to start spewing, oh, I made a mistake. But by being in the energy of everybody having a good time for 30, 40 minutes, an hour, by the time we got in the cab, we had such a better perspective.
Right.
We started to understand like, oh, those didn't, it's interesting to us because we know how we wrote the song, we know how it goes, we know how badly we've, messed up the chorus or whatever. Right. But like, we would know that like, it would just be so clear to us, like, well, we wrote the song. People didn't know that it was off, and usually live music goes by way too fast for an audience member. Like you have to know the record, to notice the thing. And even then, a lot of times fans are like, oh, it was so cool when instead of doing this on the record, they did this other thing. It's like, they think it was intentional, so it was just a really good, lesson for me that I've kept ever since we learned that in 2004 of just like no negativity until you get alone in the cab, because people go off what the energy you create. And if you're a good band, you create good energy, and then it's up to you as to whether you want to accept that and swim in it and like make it bigger, or if you want to just like slam the door on it and be like, this was a terrible show, everybody should have had a bad time.
Well, and I think that kind of goes into what we were talking about at the beginning of, going with the flow and letting go of control and being present is like, I get to choose. Like you guys made a conscious decision of how you wanted to be, especially by observing people doing it in a way that you were like, like, oh, like, yeah, we don't want to do that, you know? And it kind of goes back to like when we're, you know, and even your previous story, and you had a choice too of like how you were going to show up, and you chose differently. You chose it in a way that was going to be a better feeling experience for yourself. And therefore, and you really got to, you really showed up. And was it living by example when you had these people come up to you afterwards and be like, wow, you know, I probably wouldn't have done it at all, or, you know, and those are like beautiful gifts. You know, I just think like, you know, being an example. I remember going years ago to see Deepak Chopra speak at one of the spiritual centers up in Encinitas. And I got there late, so I was in the back room, and, you know, got to just see him on the screen, didn't really actually get to see him in person. And he spoke for like an hour and a half.
Deepak Chopra had a Jumbotron, is that what you're telling me?
And you know, he spoke for an hour and a half, and it was amazing. And then at the very end, he said, you know, and all that being said, bottom line is it begins with you. And I just think that's so. I remember walking on the beach years ago, and I was, you know, had my personal assistant business. I really wanted to do the coaching and was doing a little bit of it, but not very much. And walking on the beach, and I picked up a sand dollar, and I remember just thinking like, yeah, I just want to help people, even if it's just one person at a time, and make a difference in their life. And that's, you know, when we think about everything that's going on in the world and it's like, how am I showing up? What can I do? And that's the biggest impact that we can have, is like, how am I showing up for myself and others?
It was interesting. I'm sort of, you know, flashing back through a lot of my Victor Bravo stories that I have stored in my memory. And I remember this one time we had we toured a lot in the Midwest in the last part of our existence, because we did one sort of foray out into the Midwest, and then we made a whole bunch of connections that then led to other connections. So we did a couple of tours at the end that was all over the Midwest of the United States. And I think this was the last one we did in 2010. We went to the Midwest in January, which we had always gone in the summer before, and the Midwest in January is a different place. It's almost like a different place. But anyway, we our dear friend Mo in St. Louis, who is in an amazing band, punk band called Scene of Irony, and I'm still friends with him today. I still talk to him on Instagram from time to time. He's still doing well. But he was doing this all day punk rock festival at a place, I forget the name of it. I had it at the tip of my tongue. Anyway, and it was gonna start at like something like 1 or maybe noon or something, and it was gonna go all the way to like 2 a.m. And he had something like, I don't know, 20, 30 bands that were gonna play. But we for whatever reason, the festival had been mostly set by the time we confirmed that we were going to be in St. Louis and could do a show on like these 3 days, maybe, depending on what our other shows were doing. So he's like, the whole festival's booked, but what we'll do is we'll start it 40 minutes earlier, and you can be the first band, and you'll start at like 11:20 a.m. And we were just so excited to have a show in St. Louis. We'd play there. Fubar was the name of it. If it's still there, I don't know. It's called Fubar, I remember. But we were just so excited. It was like, because booking a tour is challenging sometimes. It's like, okay, St. Louis, we got a show in St. Louis. Awesome. You know, our existence is further justified. We actually have a show in St. Louis. So we get to St. Louis, and it's, you know, 20 below. It's freezing outside. We walk into the venue, and it's this Fubar was this gigantic, it was just for shows. And so it was like a big warehouse kind of space with like the sound guy way at the back and the stage, you know, up front. And there was one other human being in the building, and it was the sound guy that was going to run our sound. And there was like no one, and it wasn't anyone's fault because, you know, all the publicity and everything had said, you know, first band at noon or whatever. And we're like, you know, like, I'm sure Mo told people, but you know, it was very late in the game. So anyway, so Dan and I are kind of just mentally crushed immediately. Like, we're just like, wow, we drove all the way from New York City, not just for this show, but partly just for this show. And there's no one here. But, you know, one of the cool things about being on tour is like, as long as they're going to let you play, like, have a rehearsal, you know, like whatever, make the best of it. So we set up, and it was this crazy thing where I started playing. And not only, my vague recollection is the sound guy like did our sound check and then went to the bathroom first. So our first song was to no one. It was to nobody. And we're this loud, angry punk rock band. And I'm like, nah, nah, nah. And like, to no one. But I'm just like, okay, this is what happened. You know, eventually the sound guy got out of the bathroom. So I think for the second song, I was at least playing to the sound guy. But then this weird thing started happening where there was a bunch of teenagers outside, and they were like smoking or talking or whatever. And one of them came in, and I don't think he was planning on listening to the music. I think he was coming in for maybe to use the bathroom. I don't know. But we were a force in those days. Like, we were hard to ignore. You could love us or hate us, but there was really no middle ground. So, and he like turned around and he just like, you know, and then he, after half a song, he goes outside, and I was like, all right, we're back to, we lost half our audience again, you know, like, but then he comes back with like 3 other people, and this thing keeps happening where one of them leaves and comes back with like 3 or 4 more. And then they start dancing their butts off, like just moving all over the place. And
right on.
And by the end of it, we had, you know, maybe, I mean, in my mind, it was like 100 people, but it was probably like 15, 20, something like that. But I mean, they were dancing and moving around so much. It was like, we had a show. Like the last 3 or 4 songs, we were like, you know, in that wonderful zone where you're like connected with the audience.
Nice.
You know, they're loving everything you do, and, you know, just can't wait for the next song and all that sort of stuff. So it was this incredible, like, 0 to 1,000 experience where you're literally like, I don't even know if I should be playing music at all in the world, you know, to like, this is what I was born to do, you know. But the thing is, and this, I don't mean this to be critical of Dan. Dan is an amazing musician, and he was fantastic through, you know, the history of the band and everything. So it's a little unfair to tell this one story, but I think it just illustrates what a lot of us do. And I can see myself doing what he did at another time. But what happened was, you know, we get off stage, and we had a CD for sale, and most of the teenagers had like were waiting at the merch table for me. And I went to the merch table, and they're like, I want to buy your CD and I want you to sign it. And we had never had that happen before, where like more than one person like wanted to buy the CD and have us autograph it, you know. And it was so there was a line. I mean, it was like 10 people, but it was a line, you know, for my autograph.
Still, wow, that's great.
And I'm signing the autographs, and I'm just saying, thank you so much. You guys were an amazing audience. We're so grateful you were here.
You had a show.
Yeah. But out of the corner of my eye, I can see Dan is like packing up equipment or whatever, and he's very upset with me. He's like very upset. And I'm just like, this is the dream, dude. Like, what are you upset about? Like, what happened, you know? And so I finished signing the autographs for the 10, you know, teenagers, and I go over to get my guitar case or whatever. And he's very upset with me. And he's like, you can't do that. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, you can't just like go do that. And I'm like, again, I'm just on a different wavelength at this point. And he's like, dude, when we get super famous, like, you are not going to have time to like go out into the crowd and just like sign autographs for whoever might come up. You'll be out here for like 6 hours. Like, you've got to start learning discipline about like fans and stuff like that. And I was just like,
dumbfounded.
And that's why I say, like, it's a little unfair to tell that story like out of context of like our whole existence of as a band, because as a musician, you are like, especially with like us, little to no following, traveling around the country, there could be 2 people, there could be no people, there could be 20 people, we don't know.
Yeah.
Your mind does go through a lot of places. Like, you have dreams and you do want to do things towards those dreams, but you also have to be in reality and deal with some sort of disappointment and stuff. But I just was like, oh my God, dude, like you're not present, like you're not, it's just, and it was a mirror for me, I think, because I mean, I could have been there. I've been in a control freak enough space in my life at certain times where I could have been saying what he was saying, but just like I was in the flow that day. And so I was able to see what the universe was doing, and Dan was like worrying about future negative events that weren't remotely going to happen, but for them, they were real. But he was in this place of like needing to control. Like, I think what really may have triggered him, I don't know, but is the fact that like we had this starting point of like, oh, we drove to St. Louis and we're playing to the sound guy. And in 40 minutes, it completely shifted. And I think it caught him off guard because he was not in control of that situation at all. It was really a lesson in like, what if you just let the universe take something you think is a total disaster and see if the universe can make gold out of it?
Well, I don't even know that it was that so much as what I heard is you just showed up. You're like, and I think of the band Perry, where I heard them being interviewed, and they're famous now, but they were saying, it's a sister and 2 brothers. And she's like, we just played, whether there was 1 person or 10, we just wanted to play. And we just did that over and over and over again. And then, we don't know what's going to happen, right? Like, you didn't know that was going to happen, but it's just showing up anyways. And you're just like, okay. And I love what you said is like, okay, then it's just band practice, And then there's that whole inner, because we're always having inner conversations, right? And you're having those inner conversations, and and depending on how they go, really affect like how we're gonna feel and experience, and then you went with the flow, and then this amazing, like, did you ever even think that was possible? And it had so many nuggets of your vision and your dreams, and just, I'm like, dude, you have CDs out there with somebody has it with their autograph, and there, I just got chills at my legs, and they are like, it's probably a moment in their lifetime that they'll remember forever. And and you ended up having a show. Like, who would have thought from how it started at the beginning that would have occurred? But it just goes to say, just show up. We don't know. And
that's the thing. It's but it is a letting go. It's easier, I think, and I'm not we should not turn this into an amateur psychology session on Dan's mental state in like 2006 whatever, but if I think sometimes before I worked with you, before I learned about all this stuff, if I came to a situation like that and the outcome initially, at least, looked very different than what I had designed, and it looked like it was not what I wanted, then what I would do is kind of construct, like, I would feel that lack of control. Like, oh, I wanted there to be 100 people here, but obviously I'm not in control because there's 0 people here, and it's very easy to be like, to sort of, and I think a lot of times our brains do this. It's like, it can be painful to have that thought, like, oh, this is not what I wanted, and things that I wanted in my life are not on track to happen the way I want,
or I'm not good enough, or
I'm not good enough, or I'll never have the things I really want, like that sort of thing. And like, the brain can create a construct like that's the illusion of control, so like I could have done what Dan did. I also could have been like, well, nobody understands our music, that's why nobody's here, and it's fuck everybody, and like, we're never gonna make any money, blah, blah, blah. But like, that, what that really is my brain just like trying to adjust to, oh, I let go of control and it didn't go the way I wanted. And the thing that I've learned so much by watching The Secret multiple times, listening to Abraham, seeing Abraham in person, working with you as a client of your coaching, is that, you know, it's and it's also Florence Scovel Shinn's thing that my sister Kelly, who's been on this podcast before, tells me all the time. Don't be fooled by appearances.
I love that quote.
The universe is, I always think of it as like the universe is at this control station that is more, the command center of everything the universe has to manage is more complicated than any human could ever wrap their brain around. Organizing the timing and encounters and experiences and everything that we all need to orchestrate with the law of attraction and all that sort of stuff is more complicated than you can imagine. So don't take, you know, this one piece of visual evidence that you think you have and say, well, I'm all powerful, all seeing, and I know that because this scenario right now looks like this to my one little human brain here, I can predict the future and I can which might give me this momentary high of feeling like I am in control, but it's baloney because you're not. And it's really just a way of kind of like defending yourself against the fear of the unknown. But if you take any scenario like that, anything that feels like, oh, this is bad, this shouldn't have happened, this blah, 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 and just go, well, maybe the universe is smarter than me and it knows how to create a good outcome from this down the road. Again, you're letting the doors be open instead of grabbing that instinct. Like, I want to feel like I'm in control, so I'm going to slam all the doors. Like, that's gotta feel good. And it does. It doesn't feel good, but it feels like satisfying to like.
Well, it's protection from me, you know,
you feel
I'm
safe
protecting myself.
Yeah.
But
it's an illusion because it's not real. Like, you're not really in charge. And, you know, if you think you're actually in control of the universe, like, you're just going to keep having experiences that reflect back to you that you do not.
Well, and you it sounds like you specifically had an experience that you didn't even think was possible. Like, you wanted 100 people, but you didn't even think about them asking for your autograph and, you know, and then like dancing, like, you know, and then witnessing them enjoying it and then inviting other people in and it just growing. I mean, that's such a cool story.
Well, and that's the thing too, is like, I feel like, and it's one of these things about like, you just got to remember the important things you've learned. And not that you shouldn't listen to other people, but like, there's a lot of negative beliefs out in people's minds that are generating negative thoughts.
Limited thinking too. Oh, that can't happen. That's not possible.
And because I just think that, you know, a lot of musicians who want to be famous, which by the way, I absolutely want to be famous as a musician. I have no shame on that whatsoever. But I think sometimes musicians will like quit doing music or quit doing performing or whatever, because they haven't hit this like society's idea of what a successful band is. Like, you know, I'm just off the top of my head because I'm old, like Led Zeppelin, Van Halen, like that level of mega success where they're millionaires on millionaires and touring arenas, you know, for the rest of their life. And I'm not, again, full disclosure, I totally want that. But that moment in St. Louis, and I think you can hear, you know, from how I retold it, and that was 2010. So we're in 2021. That was 11 years ago. I can pull that up in my memory as if it happened yesterday. And I can pull up the amazing feelings of not just like giving other people joy, but also the joy they gave me, you know, that I received. And not just the joy I gave by signing the autographs, but the joy they gave me by just like telling me I gave them a good time. Like, that was so rewarding.
Win-win.
It may have been 16 people, but like the number of people is irrelevant. Like, that on my deathbed, that will be on the highlight reel. And I will feel like I lived my purpose on this earth. Like, that was, you know, like some people never get to do something like that. They never get to do something that they love as much as I love that, and that people responded to that well, you know.
And you really had the energy, the essence of that experience was the energy and essence of what your bigger vision of, like, you know, playing arenas and touring and having bands and and you got that. That was pretty cool.
Again, I really want to explain to everybody, Dan is a amazingly good guy. But it was just so confusing when he leaped into like he was talking about this future that included some of the things I wanted. Like in his future, he was talking about like we were famous, we did shows, people wanted our autographs, but it was like, oh, but we have to protect ourselves and like we have to protect our time and all this sort of stuff. And I'm like, he wasn't able to see in that moment, and it was just his thinking and his beliefs that we actually were receiving the thing that we were going for, you know, before you can have 100 people asking for your autograph, you have to have 10. You know? We had 10, we were on the way, you know, but like it was really sort of fascinating. And I sort of feel like the brain is really clever that way, in a way that, you know, the brain helps us do a million great things. So I'm not throwing my brain or anyone else's under the bus either, but it's just sort of like, we need to be careful, because the brain, in order to protect us, in order to do what it thinks, I put something on my Instagram this week about, you know, your brain turns everything into a crisis if it can, because it just believes that it has to save your life every day. And it doesn't have to save your life every day. And most of modern society, we're safe. Even in the COVID era, if you know, are careful and wear a mask and everything, statistically, you're safe.
Self-care, practice self-care.
And but your brain is built to deal with dangers and threats and problems, and to solve the problems, meet the threats, and deal with the dangers and protect you. So that's all well and good if you actually are attacked by a tiger. But other than that, and a few other scenarios, you need to like sort of catch the fact, like, oh, my brain is trying to do a good thing here. It's trying to make me feel more comfortable or protected or safe or whatever. But I need to like override that and make the choice to let go, to make the choice to be in the flow of what the universe is, even though it might be scary and I might not know what it is, and it might not go the way I think it is. It's going to be way better to have those doors of the universe open than to have a temporary sense of relief from slamming all the doors and feeling like the tiger can't get in, you know?
Awesome. All right, everybody. So go with the flow, be present.
Go with the flow.
Checking in, see how you're feeling, practice self-care.
Let it go. Let it go.
And show up.
I just screwed us on YouTube because now I've some copyrighted material from Disney. See if they let me upload this episode. I had to do it though. You just in the moment, you have to do a little Elsa every now and then. So everybody, thank you so much for listening to this podcast. We hope you enjoyed it, whether you listened to it, the audio version, as a podcast, audio podcast, whatever, or if you watched it on the YouTube channel. Thank you so much. Again, following, liking, subscribing, reviewing helps us. Bless you for doing it. Stephanie, if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way?
www.powerinjoy.com.
And the best way to, best way to follow me and get in touch with me is on my Instagram, which is at Collin, COLLIN _ Daniels, DANIELS _ Worster, WORSTER. You can follow me there and you can DM me, and I'd love to hear from you. All right. So thank you so much for watching, listening, everybody. We will see you or hear you next week on Co-Creation Station.